brung down, hung up, and all.
Arlo Guthrie singing Alice's Restaurant, illustrated by Andrew Kolunga. And for those of you who are just listening, you can see that online. And we're playing that today because, well, 40 years ago today, Pacifica station KPFT was blown off the air after only a few months of operation. The Ku Klux Klan had strapped dynamite to the base of the transmitter. A few months later, when they got back on their feet, they blew it up again. It was that time in October that the station was blown up just as it was playing Alice's Restaurant. Well, this is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman, and we're turning now to President Obama's announcement on Monday, formally nominating Solicitor General Elena Kagan for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court to replace retiring Justice John Paul Stevens.
Elena is widely regarded as one of the nation's foremost legal minds. She's an acclaimed legal scholar with a rich understanding of constitutional law. She's a former White House aide with a lifelong commitment to public service and a firm grasp of the nexus and boundaries between our three branches of government. She's a trailblazing leader, the first woman to serve as Dean of Harvard Law School, and one of the most successful and beloved deans in its history. And she is a superb Solicitor General, our nation's chief lawyer, representing the American people's interests before the Supreme Court.
During the brief White House ceremony, Elena Kagan expressed her love for the law.
I am proud of what all of us accomplished there. And through most of my professional life, I've had the simple joy of teaching, of trying to communicate to students why I so love the law, not just because it's challenging and endlessly interesting, although it certainly is that, but because law matters, because it keeps us safe, because it protects our most fundamental rights and freedoms, and because it is the foundation of our democracy.
If confirmed, the 50-year-old Kagan would be the court's youngest member. She would become the fourth female Supreme Court justice in U.S. history and the third on the court's current bench. She would also be the first justice in nearly 4 decades without any prior judicial experience. Elena Kagan's nomination has divided progressives, in part because so little is known about her judicial views. Her nomination sparked a heated debate between two noted legal commentators, Harvard Law professor Lawrence Lessig and constitutional law attorney and Salon blogger Glenn Greenwald. Glenn first appeared on Democracy Now! Last month, making his case against Kagan's nomination. Then on Monday, he was on our show again and then interviewed by Rachel Maddow that night on MSNBC. Right after Greenwald, Maddow interviewed Lawrence Lessig, who criticized what Greenwald had to say. This led to them both penning articles online yesterday criticizing each other, defending their position on Kagan's nomination. Well, today they join us together at the same time for a debate on Elena Kagan. Harvard Law professor Lawrence Lessig is joining us from a studio in Boston, and Salon blogger Glenn Greenwald is on Skype with us. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Let's start with Professor Lessig. Why do you support Elena Kagan as the next Supreme Court justice?
Well, I think that from the experience I've had with Elena, which is now more than 20 years, I think that she has exactly the right values and exactly the right skill that this justice will need. This is the fourth justice in the non-conservative or non-right-wing block of this right-wing court. And what that means is she needs to have the ability to persuade the fifth so that we can get 5 votes for values and positions that we believe in. And I think what she's demonstrated more than anything else is she has exactly that skill.
Glenn Greenwald, your thoughts about Elena Kagan?
Well, it's interesting. I've actually been arguing for a month now that one of the problems with her, the principal problem, is
Glenn,
that
if you could start again.
Sure. Well, I've been arguing for essentially a month now that the principal problem with her is that it's impossible to know what she thinks about virtually anything. She has a few law review articles she's written, a couple of snippets of opinions she's expressed, but by and large, she's a blank slate. We don't know what she's going to do on the court. We have no clue. And what's interesting is since her nomination was announced, if you look at venues that are very sympathetic to the president, the New York Times editorial page yesterday said that he might think that she's a good person, but the public has no way of knowing that because she spent 20 years hiding her philosophy. The columnist David Brooks said that she's the kind of person who placed career advancement above any commitment to any opinions, and you can scour her speeches to find opinions and come up empty. Tom Goldstein, who's a huge booster of hers, said that she's the nominee about whom the least is known since at least David Souter, and we know the huge surprise that he produced. And even her friend, Jeffrey Toobin in The New Yorker, who knows her for 20 years, said he's happy for her personally, but he can't comment on her nomination because in all that time, he's never heard her express any opinion about any political or legal issue of consequence. And what little we do know is somewhat troubling in some issues. On other issues, it's actually encouraging. But I think the nomination process has to reveal a lot more about what she thinks and believes before anyone can make a rational assessment.
Well, what about that, Professor Lessig, of her being a blank slate or hiding her views over these years?
Yeah, so it's just wrong to say that she's been hiding her views. What she's been doing is doing her job. And I think what we need is a little bit of perspective here. You know, what's most important in my view about what the president has done here is he's appointed a non-judge, or he's nominated a non-judge to the Supreme Court. And that's extremely valuable. This court is filled with former judges. And if there had been a non-judge, if there had been Justice O'Connor, who had been a politician before, or even a Justice Rehnquist, this court would not have made its blunder in Citizens United because it would have had a broader perspective and understanding about the political system. Now, every non-judge that you appoint, Glenn Greenwald could make exactly the same criticisms of. We didn't know anything about Lewis Powell. We didn't know anything about Justice White. We didn't know anything about Justice Douglas. We didn't know anything about Chief Justice Rehnquist when they were appointed, because all of them had had an experience that was not the experience of writing opinions in a wide range of cases that every single judge does. Now, we can decide we should never have anybody except judges on the Supreme Court, but I think that would be a big mistake. Now, I don't know about Jeffrey Toobin, but I spent 4 years sitting across a table from Elena Kagan 3 days a week, listening to her spout very strong and, in my progressive views, very correct views about a wide range of constitutional issues. She's written substantively about the First Amendment, which is an extremely important part of the Supreme Court's jurisprudence. And contrary to Glenn's characterization, her views about the president's power in the presidential administration article are views that liberals and progressives should embrace because they are exactly contrary to the view of the right-wing Bush-Cheney doctrine that says the president can do whatever he wants, Congress be damned. Her view is the president has this power, but only so long as Congress grants that power to the president. So I think she has given us clear views in important areas, but more than that, she has spent her time not blogging, not Twittering, not trying to be out there in the forefront of every single legal issue, just doing her job and doing it extremely well. She was an enormously successful dean, and she's been enormously successful in every single job she's had. I think progressives should be rallying around this woman and not making it seem like this is some kind of outrage that she has not spent 20 years writing opinions on a federal bench.
Glenn Greenwald.
Nobody thinks that only judges should be appointed to the Supreme Court. That is a total straw man. You don't need to be a judge to leave behind a record of what you believe about the great political and legal issues of the day. We're talking to somebody right now named Larry Lessig, who has never been a judge, and yet has a very extensive record of scholarship to enable persons to know what he thinks about all of these matters. He's here debating it now. Look at the alternatives that people were suggesting to Elena Kagan. Numerous non-judges, such as Harold Koh or Pamela Karlan, professors who, unlike Kagan, have a very lengthy record of advocacy and involvement in political and legal issues of the day. Not only has she never been a judge, she's never really been a lawyer until she was Solicitor General in terms of being in court. So it's an absolute blank slate. Things that we do know about her, I mean, we can sit here and try and tell the audience what she really meant in that 2001 presidential administration article. That's very esoteric. We can each say different things. Just look at what people who aren't a longtime friend of hers, like Professor Lessig or me, an opponent of her nominee, said. Neil Katyal, who's her deputy solicitor general, wrote a law review article criticizing parts of what she wrote and said that, in essence, that she embraced parts of what the precursor to the Bush-Cheney unitary theory. That's what he said. William West, one of the nation's foremost experts in administrative law and a professor of law at the University of Texas, said that it showed that she's a great fan of presidential power.